Hi, everybody. This is a continuation of our discussion of how to write the synthesis essay. I wanted to continue walking through for the section that didn't completely finish. One of our sections did, but for the section that did not completely finish, walking through one of the samples on the College Board website, I wanted to walk you through that. So, for the students that already did the daylight saving times example, this is another example of a released essay and the sample scores on the College Board website. This one has to do with the question of whether or not college is worth it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the question itself. Pardon me. And then we'll take a look at a successful student essay, and then we'll talk about why it's successful based on the rubric. And these are the items that you want to keep in mind on Friday when you are, on Thursday when you're taking your timed writing. So the synthesis question, as we talked about, will be question number 1, and there are 6 sources attached to it. What you want to do is read the introduction, which starts right here, that we talked about, which was actually part of what we talked about with your abstract of your research paper. It gives context and creates the issue itself. There's always a topic, but the introduction to the prompt actually creates the issue. So given that college graduates have faced record levels of unemployment, the situation has led people to question what they value about higher education. Some high school students and their parents are wondering if a college education is worth the cost. Others, however, believe that a college education prepares students for more than just a job or career. All right, so there's your issue. Is college worth it? Basically, that's the question that you're answering. They've asked you to write a well-developed essay that evaluates whether college is worth its cost. So those are the parameters of the argument that you are setting up. Be sure to word your thesis in a way that responds to the task at hand. You want to make a point about whether or not college is worth the cost. Maybe you already have an idea. Maybe you already have an idea of how to argue it. If so, excellent. Then you can go ahead and read through the documents, mining for quotes that support what you think. If you don't have an idea, that's okay too. Read through the documents and get an idea of what other people are saying, and I think it'll help you formulate a position on the topic. Now, also on Edline are the steps of how to write a synthesis essay. Okay, so you're going to review the prompt for the issue parameters and context. Decide what the prompt is asking you to do. That's what we just did. And be sure the wording of your thesis reflects this when you go ahead and word it. Step 2, your opinion. Do you have one? What is it? How will you tentatively word it? If you have a position, this can help you mine for great quotes as you read the documents. All right, so let's go back and take a look at these documents, A through F. You have an option every time you refer to a document or quote a document. Either way, you need to cite it. I think the easiest way is simply to cite source A, source B, source C, source D, source E, or source F. Your other option is to cite them according to the author or publisher, which are in parentheses next to it. I think it's much easier to go in order from A through F, but you're certainly welcome to make that decision. Our first document is the case for working with your hands. Now, just from the title there, you get the idea that maybe this person isn't necessarily in favor of a liberal arts education for everybody if they're talking about the importance of working with your hands. And that is ultimately what the article is about. So what you want to do is look back through here, read this carefully but quickly, and that's the line we have to create here. You want to read them quickly because you need to move through the 6 documents, but carefully enough that you don't misunderstand the point of the author. That's going to be a major deduction on the rubric if you misrepresent a document. This one is going to be This one is going to be con, the benefit of a college education for everyone. And one of the steps that you're going to take, if we move back to the Edline page, is reading the documents and then assign a positive or negative sign, pro or con, in whatever way that makes sense to you depending on the prompt. Also summarize in a sentence in your own shorthand and underline great quotable quotes. as you're going through, think about, is this person pro this issue, con this issue, however you're framing the issue in your mind. And it might be different for some people. But, whatever makes sense to you, it's your own shorthand that matters here. And you're going to go ahead and assign the plus or minus sign so you can see it. And when you flip back through, you don't have to remember which it was. And a quick summary of the entire document, somewhere you can see it in your own shorthand, that makes sense to you. So moving back to this document, we see you can't hammer a nail over the internet, nor can Indians fix your car because they're in India. So this refers to outsourcing. So if you were going to refer to that, especially if you are on the same side as this author, that's a great line. That's a good quotable quote. That's what we talked about. I would underline that. You also want to think about sources that don't agree with you and how you would work that into your argument. Even though, think about those templates we had in the book, They Say, I Say. Even though some may argue, you can't hammer a nail over an internet, is that really the question that think of rhetorical bridges to use quotes that may not agree with your point and be able to place them in the essay. Okay, document number 2. What's a liberal arts education good for? All right, and this has to do with, here in this paragraph, we see very clearly, a successful liberal arts education develops the capacity for innovation and for judgment. Those who can imagine how best to reconfigure existing resources and project future results will be the shapers of our economy and culture. We seldom get to have all the information we would like, but we still must act. The habits of mind developed in a liberal arts context often result in a combination. Okay, and it goes on from there. So this is pro college education. It's worth it even if it doesn't lead to an actual job the second you graduate, with a 6-figure salary. This is arguing that liberal arts education teaches you the ability to think, which is going to be necessary no matter what you do. Okay, moving on to source C. See, you have a graph here, and this is new college graduates losing ground on wages. All right, so we already know the shape of this information. So I would go ahead and put a minus sign here where the last one was a plus sign. The wages have gone down over the years for college graduates. But if you look closely at this information, there's a little bit of subtext there. It's gone down, but how much? And is it still above what you would make if you had never gone to college at all? So that's also, if you are pro-college in your argument, there's definitely a point to be made here given this information. So you want to look closely at that. Source D is even for cashiers, college pays off. And this has to do basically with the amount of money someone with a college degree is going to earn over someone that does not have one. So you probably want to underline, pardon me, the facts and statistics that you will encounter in this article. Construction workers, police officers, plumbers, retail salespeople, and secretaries, among others, make significantly more with a degree than without one. Why? Education helps people do higher skilled work, get jobs with better paying companies, or open their own businesses. Okay, so this last paragraph here is your money paragraph. That's what you would underline. That's where there's other statistics in there that you might want to point to. But this would be a plus on that paper with your little shorthand comment summarizing it as well. Source E is a story about the Thiel Fellowship paying 24 talented students $100,000 not to attend college. So ostensibly, this is negative. But again, if you data mine in this article, you'll see that there's some things that might be able to very readily be pulled to support a proposition as well. Thiel is convinced that social pressure for students to pursue lower risk trajectories in their career choices will lead to less innovation in the future. Okay, so that's his ultimate push here. So you see that it's not necessarily college isn't any good. He's just trying to encourage students to take a different trajectory. All right, and source F is our last one, and this is from a Pew Social and Demographic Trends. Executive summary, is college worth it? So this is going to be a lot of facts and figures. It's not supposed to be biased, so you could kind of call this plus and minus and just use the statistics any way you want. All right, so that's the review of the documents themselves. Now let's take a look at the rubric and what some of the students did with this information. Now we're going to look at our benchmark numbers. Essays earning a score of 8 effectively evaluate whether or not a college is worth its cost. Make sure you realize that that's the most important criteria when the readers are evaluating this essay. They develop their argument by effectively synthesizing. That means incorporating in a way that you're producing a new product and not just, putting a jigsaw puzzle together with the edges very visible to each other. You want to incorporate it so that jigsaw puzzle, the edges sort of disappear and it becomes a whole new product. And that sometimes means incorporating quotes into your own sentences, incorporating just a couple words of a quote, or simply referring to a source in a paraphrasing type way. The varying style of incorporating your sources will allow you to have that sort of blended edge result. The evidence and explanations used are appropriate and convincing, and the link between the sources and the writer's argument is strong. Okay, so that's the other thing. The link between the sources that you use, the way that you use them actually, because you have no control over the sources, but the link between the sources and the way you use them is strong. That's an 8. That's the 8 level. 6 is adequate. So this is what you're going to do for adequate. The score of 6 adequately evaluates whether college is worth its cost. They develop their argument by adequately synthesizing at least 3 of the sources. The evidence and explanation used are appropriate and sufficient, and the link between the writer's argument is apparent. So that's the difference. The link is strong in the 8 level. The link is there in the 6 level. It's apparent. It's visible. When you get to 4, which is inadequate, they inadequately evaluate whether college is worth its cost. They develop their argument by synthesizing at least 2 sources. Okay, so use of sources is one of the things that drops you down to a 4. But the evidence or explanations used may be inappropriate, insufficient, or inconsistent. The sources may dominate. You don't want to summarize. You want to incorporate them into your own argument. That's going to bring you down to a 4. The writer may misunderstand, misrepresent, or oversimplify the sources. So if you use a source in a way that's not true to what it's saying, that's a 4. Okay, so you can actually write a good essay, but misrepresent a source, and according to the rubric, that can definitely bring you to a 4. So you want to be sure that you're reading quickly, but carefully enough that you're understanding the spirit of what the author is saying in that source. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the more successful essays. And I just want to point out a couple things that the student does successfully, and then that's the kind of thing you want to incorporate when you write your synthesis essay in your first time writing. Okay, so given that question about whether college is worth it, this student says, it seems that the ultimate function of American high schools has become to funnel as many young minds as possible into the institutions of higher learning. The mindset behind this, though hotly debated, is that a college education increases the quality of life of the student and society as a whole. All right, so that's a great lead-in. It summarizes the context and importance of the issue, much in the same way the prompt does. And you can go ahead and use that prompt, not the words, but the idea of it to frame your essay as well. While critics contest the idea that college benefits an individual economically, other areas of life are undeniably improved by a college education. The importance of freedom of thought and innovation provided by a college education cannot be valued under possible economic discrepancies. Okay, so I think the wording of the thesis statement is a little bit clunky there. I think that he means to say that the value of being an educated individual and gaining that sort of freedom of thought or ability to think can't be evaluated, or there's not a price. In a sense, he's saying it's priceless. So it's kind of clunky on the thesis wording, but he does include a counter argument right before his thesis, which is effective because we are ultimately trying to get these documents to talk to each other. So you want to use the cons, you want to use the pros, you want to incorporate as many of the documents as possible in your essay. And it's a lot to juggle in 40 minutes. But I think with practice, you'll get used to doing it and it won't seem like such a time barrier. Okay, first body paragraph. The largest motivator behind going or not going to college seems to be money. It's commonly accepted that a college education results in better financial situations later in life. It's certainly true that college grads earn, on average, $20,000 per year more than those with only a high school diploma, source F. All right, so we've paraphrased there. He's incorporated his source. That was a great way to incorporate it into his own argument or her own argument. It's also true that college grads are less likely to be unemployed, source D. These statistics fail to impress critics. They argue that those employed in sectors that do not require a college degree are less expendable. The people that fix cars will always be needed, even during economic downturns. And I point out, and we're digging into this paragraph specifically, because the author has used two sources that ostensibly support her argument and paraphrased a source that does not. So in this way, the documents are what they want you to be doing with them, talking to each other. You're entering into an academic conversation where you're allowing dissenting voices to seep in, but you're ultimately prevailing with your own argument. The debate over the actual value of college education is often boiled down to dollars and cents, when in reality the gains made through an education encompass so much more. And this is the point that the writer is going to continue to make throughout this essay. Let's take a look at another body paragraph. Putting aside the issue of money may seem counterintuitive when considering the worth of an education, but is it necessary? Pardon me, but it is necessary. There's more to life. A large part of college is personal growth. Source B. Coincidentally, personal growth also plays a large role in perceived quality of life. Taking this into consideration makes college into more than a machine designed to increase an individual's level of monetary success. While some may claim that those who work in fulfilling jobs do not require degrees feel more content, source A, it's impossible to ignore the way in which colleges, quote, help students discover what they love to do, source B. Higher education can ultimately lead to better emotional quality of life, and this cannot be discounted when weighing the value of furthering one's education. So in this paragraph, you have a deft incorporation of sources where there's a little bit of quoting, a little bit of paraphrasing, and there is always the concession of the counter-argument, and then this student's argument, which in their viewpoint outweighs it, that it's not just about the money, it's not just about the monetary value. So they're taking the word worth and making it a little more sophisticated given this argument. You know, if you're only going to look at it as whether or not a college education is worth it, as to whether or not dollars and cents wise you're going to make out, here's what you've spent for it, here's what you're ultimately going to make based on it. That's one aspect of the argument. And this student has chosen to make it a little more sophisticated, and I think she's done a fairly good job. It's not perfect, which is always the good news with these. It's not perfect, and yours need not be perfect either. But if you remember some principles of how they're putting this together and what worked well, then you can model that too and also be successful. So I'm going to go down to the conclusion here. Because this is long, and we don't ever want to say absolutes here. Longer essays do tend to do better. Ones that use more sources do tend to do better. But of course, the communication aspect, the clarity with which you communicate your point is always going to be at the forefront in the score that you receive. The economic benefits of a college education may be questionable, but the ways in which individuals are prepared to become contributing and innovative members of society is too important to ignore. College is an essential step towards improving the societal standard of living. Okay, so that's their overall conclusion to their point, and it does its job. It answers the so what. So what is the importance, really, of having a college education if it isn't always monetarily beneficial, but society benefits? And that's, you know, this student has remembered to include her so what. All right, so let's take a look at the results here. This was student 1A. Take time to think about what you think this student received if you haven't already looked. And student 1A received a score of 8. And although in many places, including the thesis statement, which you would think would be really the hallmark moment of, where the grader is going to go, is not perfect. And this essay still scored an 8. And let's look at what was really important to the graders. They said this essay effectively evaluates whether college is worth the cost. It argues that although, quote, the debate over the actual value of college education is often boiled down to dollars and cents, in reality, the gains made through an education encompass so much more. They liked the way the writer said that. They liked the sophisticated angle she took on this argument in order to write the essay. The essay effectively discusses the issue of money through source-informed argumentation using sources A, D, and F, but it continues arguing that personal growth, which is gained through the college experience, quote, plays a large part in perceived quality of life. The essay then extends the argument of the benefits for the individual to society as a whole, noting that college, quote, harbors critical thought, and that those with a college education can become agents of change who are capable of producing meaningful advances in the world. There was a misspelling there, but they've reproduced it faithfully. The essay concludes that no matter what the economic benefit, quote, the ways in which individuals are prepared to become contributing and innovative members of society are too important to ignore. The evidence and explanations used are appropriate and convincing, and the link between the sources and the argument is strong. For its thorough development and control of language, so the development of the argument and the way you said it. Sometimes grace counts for a lot. As long as you're not wrong. Once you're wrong, the grace of the way you say things doesn't account for as much. But the grace and the strength of the argument earn that essay a score of 8. So that's essentially what you're doing with the synthesis essay. Putting these sources together, thinking of the best way to use snippets, pieces, statistics, quotes, words from these sources, putting them together to form the new product, which is your piece, without being wrong about the spirit of the sources, and in a way that makes these documents sort of talk to each other through your writing. And that's what's going to get you the best score. Good luck.